Vikings, the savage and violent heathens who explored and conquered the world. They never bathed, didn't give women any rights, destroyed churches, pillaged the riches of other countries and made everyone there their slaves. But whether all these things about the Vikings are true, or just myths that were spread throughout the centuries? In this video, we are going to debunk 10 common misconceptions about the Vikings and their lifestyle. So make sure you watch this video till the end. The Vikings were giants. The Vikings were taller than most of the people from other territories they came in contact with. But they ain't no giants. They were humans like us, but they were taller and stronger than an average person. But not all the Vikings were tall. People who had access to more or better food in the Viking Age were often taller than the average person due to having a better lifestyle. Everyone from the Nordic world was a Viking. Nowadays, people think that all the Old Norse people were Vikings and raiders. But that's not the truth. Norse and Viking refer to the same Germanic people who settled in Scandinavia during the Viking Age. They spoke the Old Norse language. But the people who referred to as Norsemen or Northmen were only traders, and the people who were actually farmers but were part-time warriors led by people of noble birth were called Vikings. These Norsemen or traders traded with other cultures and regions. So, not all the Scandinavians were Vikings. Vikings were all blonde. Genetic studies have proven that the majority of the Vikings in West Scandinavia and therefore Denmark were red-haired. In the northeastern Scandinavia around Stockholm, it was mostly blonde hair that was dominant. A recent study showed that some Vikings were also dark-haired. Vikings were the only inhabitants of medieval Scandinavia. No. Scandinavia was also inhabited by the ancestors of the people now known as Sami, a semi-nomadic people who traditionally lived in the far north of Norway, Sweden, Finland, and parts of Russia. Women had no rights. That's entirely not true. The written sources portray Viking women as independent and possessing rights. Compared to women elsewhere in the same period, Viking women had more freedom. They could ask for divorce if not treated properly, and when the man was called on an expedition, the responsibility for the farm was handed over to the woman. They could also own property. They drank from the skulls of their enemies. Vikings did not actually drink from the skulls of their enemies. This was a misunderstanding of an Old Norse poetic kenning. In a Norse poem, there was a line, "Drink beer at once from the curved branches of skulls." Curved branches of skulls is a kenning meaning a horn, but was translated by Ole Worm as the heroes hoped to drink in Odin's hall from the skulls of those they had killed. As the kenning suggests, Vikings actually drank from horns of cattle or goats. Vikings burned their dead in ships. Yeah, it's true that Vikings burned their dead in ships, but not always. In Norse mythology, boats symbolized safe passage into the afterlife on the same vessel that aided their travels in life, so they played a key role in funeral rites. Some grave mounds were built to resemble ships, with stones used to outline the vessel's shape. But it seems that the practice of burying people with their ships was rarely occurred. Some of the high-ranked Norsemen, not only men, women were buried with their actual boats. Because of the cost of building these legendary longboats, funeral boats were rarely sent out to sea. The Vikings only used primitive weapons. The Vikings are often shown with primitive weapons such as axes and spears. But they had actually very skilled weaponsmiths. They used a method called pattern welding, where the Vikings could make swords that were both extremely sharp and flexible. The rarest and exceptional weapon made by the Vikings was the sword Ulfbert. The sword is of such high quality that many attempts to make a replica in modern day by using the method the Vikings did has failed. The Vikings were dirty and smelled badly. With all the pillaging and murdering, the common perception is that Vikings were rugged, dirty, and smelly, but actually Viking men were surprisingly clean. Not only did they bathe once a week, but tweezers, combs, ear cleaners and razors have been unearthed at Viking sites. The Vikings pillaged, raped and murdered people constantly. Even though the Vikings did raid plenty of cities throughout Europe, including their own neighbors, it was actually only a very small percentage that was warriors. Like I said before, Vikings and Norsemen are different. Only the Vikings did all those things, but not constantly. The majority of the Vikings were farmers. They leave their wives and children to go and raid other settlements. So, as soon as they gained enough spoils, they returned to their homes to be with their family and do farming. For the Vikings that did set sail to raid and explore new lands for riches, it was not just in the search of silver and women. Many Vikings settled more or less peacefully in places such as England and France, but also in new and unexplored lands like Iceland and Greenland. They also loved to explore new trade routes and trade with almost every country of the then known world, and in their search for new lands, the Vikings even crossed the Atlantic and reached America 500 years before Columbus. They called North America Vinland and the natives living there as Skraeling. What do you think about these common misconceptions about the Vikings? Comment down your thoughts. I'm sure you must have enjoyed this video. If you did, tap the thumbs up icon. Also, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and tap the bell icon to get notified whenever I upload a video. I will see you again in a new video with a new topic to explain. Thanks for watching.